Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about TN visas or your trade NAFTA visa for Canadian citizens and Mexican citizens. I'm going to discuss an overview of what is a TN visa, how do you get it, how do you apply for it, and the eligibility requirements. And further down, before this video ends, I'm going to share with you how a registered nurse and at the same time a Canadian citizen can apply for a TN visa at a port of entry based on my experience at the Toronto Pearson International Airport. So this process is similar to other airports. Toronto Pearson International Airport is one of the pre-clearance facility of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So there are 8 airports in Canada that a person can be pre-cleared at the airport, and the flight to the US is considered to be a domestic flight. So stay tuned, let's get started. The North American Free Trade Agreement, or CUSMA, the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement, was created for special economic and trade relationships for the United States, Canada, and Mexico. The TN non-immigrant classification permits qualified Canadian and Mexican citizens to seek temporary entry into the United States to engage in business activities at a professional level. Among the types of 61 professionals who are eligible to seek admission as TN non-immigrants are accountants, registered nurses, engineers, lawyers, pharmacists, scientists, and teachers. You may be eligible for TN non-immigrant status if you are a citizen of Canada or Mexico, your profession qualifies under the regulations, the position in the United States requires a NAFTA professional, you have a prearranged full-time or part-time job with a U.S. employer but not self-employment, and you have the qualifications to practice in the profession in question. Eligibility criteria. Unlike Mexican citizens, Canadian citizens are generally eligible for admission as non-immigrants without a visa. The TN category, a non-immigrant classification, simply reflects this general exemption from the visa requirement. NAFTA governs which evidence is required to prove whether a Canadian or a Mexican citizen is a professional in a qualifying profession. Canadian citizens. If you are a Canadian citizen, then you are not required to apply for a TN visa at a U.S. consulate. You may establish eligibility for TN classification at the time you seek admission to the United States by presenting required documentation to a U.S. Customs and Border Protection officer at certain CBP designated U.S. ports of entry or at a designated pre-clearance pre-flight inspection station. You must provide the following documentation to the CBP officer. Number 1, proof of Canadian citizenship, which is your Canadian passport, unexpired, letter from your prospective employer detailing items such as the professional capacity in which you will work in the United States, the purpose of your employment, your length of stay, and your educational qualifications, and credentials evaluation together with any applicable fees. Alternatively, a prospective TN employer may choose to file on behalf of a Canadian citizen who is outside the United States by submitting Form I-129 or your petition for non-immigrant worker to the USCIS or the United States Citizenship Immigration Service. Premium processing service is available. If USCIS approves Form I-129, you, the prospective worker, may then apply to CBP for admission to the United States as a TN non-immigrant by providing the following documentation to a CBP officer at a certain CBP designated U.S. ports of entry at a designated pre-clearance pre-flight inspection station. Your proof of Canadian citizenship and the approval notice from USCIS for Form I-129. In addition, when applying for admission, you should have in your possession a copy of the Form I-129 and all supporting documentation that was submitted to USCIS to respond to questions about your eligibility. You should also be prepared to pay any applicable inspection fees at the time you seek admission. If a CBP officer finds you eligible for admission, you will be admitted as a TN non-immigrant. Mexican citizens. If you are a Mexican citizen, then you are required to obtain a visa to enter the United States as a TN non-immigrant. You should apply for a TN visa directly at a U.S. embassy or consulate in Mexico near you. Once you are approved for a TN visa, you may apply for admission at certain CBP designated U.S. ports of entry or at a designated pre-clearance pre-flight inspection station. If a CBP officer finds you eligible for admission, then you will be admitted as a TN non-immigrant. Dependents of TN non-immigrants. Any accompanying or following to join spouse and children under the age of 21 may be eligible for TD non-immigrant status. Spouses and children are not permitted to work while in the U.S., but they are permitted to study. Granted TD status for no longer than the period of time granted to the principal TN non-immigrant. Extending your TD non-immigrant stay. If a Canadian or Mexican TN non-immigrant applies for an extension of stay in the United States at the end of his or her period of admission or authorization as a TN, any eligible TD family member may also apply to extend their status without the need to travel abroad. If a Mexican TD dependent wishes to travel abroad, following approval of any such extension of stay and expiration of the TD visa, the family member will be required to apply for a new TD visa at a U.S. embassy or consulate before being permitted to return to the United States in TD status. Canadian citizen registered nurses. The requirements to include are the following when applying for a TN visa. Your proof of Canadian citizenship, which is your unexpired Canadian passport, original letter from your prospective employer detailing items such as professional capacity in which you will work in the United States. The type of employment must be specified, could either be full-time or part-time, the purpose of your employment, your length of stay, your educational qualifications, your professional qualifications in the United States as registered nurse, the details of your visa screen certificate issued by CGFNS International under the Division of the International Commission on Healthcare Professions, and your certifications received as RN. This is what you call your non-immigration employment letter coming from your prospective employer, which is a proof that you are being hired to work as a registered nurse in the United States. Just a heads up, you need to inform your prospective employer ahead of time that the letter must be signed using a blue ink pen. Third requirement is your educational and professional qualifications, including your transcript of records, diploma, professional licenses as registered nurse, and certifications including trainings and participation. Your fourth requirement is your visa screen certificate issued by CGFNS International under the Division of the International Commission on Healthcare Professions or ICHP. This certificate usually expires after 5 years from the date of approval. This is what they're looking for, your credential evaluation, as proof that you are screened to work as a U.S. and you are qualified to work as a registered nurse in the United States. Another requirement is your Nexus membership information. If you have a Nexus membership, you need to update this as well because you already have a TN visa and this needs to be updated when entering the US. Your updated and comprehensive resume, and last but not the least, get ready for your payment of $50 plus $6 for your I-94, a total of $56 that can be paid by debit or credit card only. So here are the steps to apply a TN visa at a port of entry or a pre-clearance facility in Canada. This is based on my experience. I applied for my TN visa at the Toronto Pearson International Airport US CBP pre-clearance facility. Number one, the first step is to arrive at the airport as early as possible, around 4 hours before your flight to the United States. It's better to be early than late. There's a side note here that if you are not flying and decided to cross at the land border, you are coming from Ontario, Canada, the only US border processing TN visas is before entering Buffalo, New York. Second step is to bear in mind that when applying for a TN visa, you can only enter the US 10 days before your work start date. 11 days or more is not allowed. Third step, line up normally as you should as an airline passenger. Having Nexus membership or card is beneficial as it will bypass the regular queue. Number 4, once you arrive at the US pre-clearance facility at a US Customs and Border Protection at Toronto Pearson International Airport, follow the instructions to be done as you join the queue. Number 5, once you are being catered by the initial US CBP officer, inform him or her that you are applying for a TN visa as registered nurse in the US and that you are a Canadian citizen. This officer will get your Canadian passport. Number 6, the initial US CBP officer will ask you if you have the complete required documents for TN visa application. Then you say, yes, I have it. Then show it to him or her. Seventh step, you will then be accompanied by the initial officer going to the back office for processing of TN visa application. Then he or she will hand over your Canadian passport to the second and usually the final US CBP immigration officer who will decide your case. You will then be advised to take a seat for a while. Eighth step, the US CBP immigration officer will then call your name. Please be attentive. Then go to the specified counter of that officer. Number 9, the officer may ask you questions about your TN visa application, including your professional qualifications, credential evaluation, and your employment in the US. Answer only what is being asked. Tell the truth and stay calm. This will depend on the officer deciding your case. In my experience, he only asked me what is my profession in the United States, then he began to process my TN visa application. Number 10, once approved, you will then be asked to pay for the application fee at the cashier. You will be directed by an officer where to pay. You will pay a total of $56 by debit or credit card. That is $50 plus $6 for I-94. You will then come back to the officer who decided your case and show it to him or her the receipt. Number 11, some documents will be collected by the officer deciding your case, and he or she might return the other documents to you, including your Canadian passport with a TN visa. It is usually a stamp and a handwritten note if applicable, and it also indicates as to when it will expire. Most of the time, you are given 3 years as Canadian citizen, and you can renew for unlimited times, provided you follow the rules and policy as a TN visa holder. Number 12, you are then allowed to exit, go to your assigned gate, and board your flight to the United States. 13, you will then start your career as a registered nurse in the US. Congratulations. In my case, the officer placed a note on my TN visa that when I go home to Canada for a holiday and return back to the US, I must show every time my visa screen certificate to the US CBP officer. However, this wasn't the case based on my experience. I have been back and forth at the US Canada border for many times, and no officer has required me to show my visa screen certificate. However, I always bring it in case an officer might look for it. I'm just being prepared at all times. So this is how you apply for a TN visa, especially if you are a Canadian citizen and you are as well as a registered nurse and you want to work in the US as a registered nurse. And this is my experience on how I apply for a TN visa. I hope this will help you a lot. Thank you and have a great day. And that concludes our video for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click the subscribe button and like my videos. Thank you so much. See you soon. Have a great day.